In 1944 alone, American factories rolled out 96,318 military aircraft. Let that sink in. That's one complete warplane every 5.5 minutes, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. German military intelligence, documented and captured Bundesarchiv reports, estimated American production capacity at roughly 1/3 of the actual output. They were wrong by over 200,000 aircraft. When Allied interrogators showed German Armaments Minister Albert Speer the actual American production figures in 1945, his reaction was documented in official transcripts. He called the numbers impossible and initially refused to believe them, insisting they must be Allied propaganda. This wasn't some minor bureaucrat. This was the man who ran Germany's entire war economy, and he couldn't comprehend what America had accomplished. Here's the cognitive dissonance that should blow your mind. German engineers pioneered assembly line innovations. They were considered the world's industrial leaders throughout the 1930s. They spent years trying to understand how America achieved production rates that completely defied their calculations. Captured Luftwaffe intelligence documents from 1943 show German analysts actually questioning whether American aircraft were inferior wooden mock-ups being counted as combat aircraft. They literally couldn't believe the numbers were real planes. The shock factor gets even more staggering. By 1945, America had produced more combat aircraft than Germany, Japan, Britain, and the Soviet Union combined. Ford's Willow Run plant alone, according to War Production Board records, produced more B-24 Liberators, 86-85 of them, than the entire Italian aircraft industry produced in all categories during the entire war. One American factory outproduced an entire nation. But how? How did German engineers completely miscalculate American industrial capacity? To understand that, military production records show we need to go back to 1940. To understand the magnitude of what America accomplished, you need to understand who they were up against. In 1940, Germany possessed Europe's most advanced industrial economy. This wasn't propaganda. This was documented reality. The Messerschmitt and Focke-Wulf factories employed cutting-edge production techniques that were the envy of the world. German aircraft production in 1939 totaled 8295 aircraft, more than Britain and France combined, according to Reich Air Ministry statistics preserved in the Bundesarchiv. German engineering confidence wasn't arrogance. It was well-founded and thoroughly documented. Their aircraft designs were technologically superior in multiple categories. The Bf-109 fighter held world speed records. German metallurgy, precision tooling, and aeronautical engineering were considered world-leading. Educational institutions like the Technische Hochschule Berlin were producing engineers who genuinely believed German industrial methods were unmatched. And honestly, they had good reason to believe it. But here's where it gets interesting. Captured intelligence documents from 1940 to 1941 show that German planners actually recognized American industrial potential. They just completely dismissed it. Internal Luftwaffe assessments claimed American workers were undisciplined compared to German precision manufacturing culture. One captured intelligence document from 1941 stated, and I quote, "American automobile factories cannot simply be converted to aircraft production. The precision requirements are entirely different." Hermann Göring's dismissiveness is absolutely crucial to understanding this story. As Reichsmarschall and head of the Luftwaffe, this guy ran Germany's entire air force. His statements in Nuremberg trial transcripts reveal he believed American aircraft production claims were exaggerated for propaganda purposes until 1943. Think about that. The man in charge of Germany's air war thought American production numbers were fake news. The German aircraft production methodology was built on a foundation of skilled craftsmen. Each aircraft was practically hand-built by trained specialists who'd spent years mastering their craft. Messerschmitt's Regensburg plant, according to captured production records, employed this traditional approach religiously. Precision over speed, quality over quantity. It was the German way. It had always worked. But while German engineers celebrated their documented technical excellence and dismissed American capabilities, American industrial planners were quietly studying production methods that would completely revolutionize warfare itself. Methods the Germans never saw coming. Now here's where the story gets really interesting. Because in 1940, America wasn't some industrial powerhouse ready to dominate aircraft production. Far from it. The dire reality was documented in official statistics. America's entire military aircraft inventory numbered just 2,470 planes, according to Army Air Corps records. Let me put that in perspective. The United States ranked 18th globally in military aircraft production. 18th. Behind Romania. American aircraft manufacturers were small operations. Boeing employed just 4,000 workers. Curtiss-Wright had 9,000. These weren't massive industrial complexes. These were essentially large workshops. The skepticism wasn't just from the Germans. It was everywhere and it was thoroughly documented. British purchasing missions in 1940, preserved in Imperial War Museum archives, reported American factories were not prepared for mass production of combat aircraft. But it gets worse. Charles Lindbergh himself, America's most famous aviator, testified before Congress in 1941. His testimony is in the congressional record. He argued America should not even attempt to match German production because, and I quote, "we lack the industrial organization." Official War Department assessments laid out the massive disadvantages. First, skilled workforce shortage. Aircraft production required specialized metal workers, riveters, and precision assemblers. These skills were in critically short supply. Second, factory capacity. Existing aircraft plants were small, custom-build operations. Nothing like automotive mass production scale. Third, supply chain problems. There was no established network for aluminum, high-grade steel, precision instruments at the volumes required. Fourth, design limitations. American aircraft designs in 1940 were considered inferior to German counterparts in most categories. Contemporary media coverage documented the widespread pessimism. The New York Times in early 1941 published expert analysis questioning whether Roosevelt's ambitious call for 50,000 aircraft was achievable or merely political rhetoric. Even American military leadership shared these doubts. Army Air Corps planning documents from 1941, preserved in National Archives Record Group 18, show even American commanders were uncertain about achieving large-scale production within any reasonable timeframe. But declassified War Production Board documents reveal American industrial planners had identified a revolutionary approach that German engineers had completely overlooked. The breakthrough was deceptively simple but absolutely revolutionary. Mass production philosophy applied to aircraft manufacturing. This was a concept German craftsman engineers fundamentally misunderstood. War Production Board documents from 1941 to 1942 show American planners made a radical decision. They would abandon traditional aircraft manufacturing entirely. Let me tell you about the Willow Run Revolution. Henry Ford and his production chief Charles Sorensen's approach, documented in Ford archives at the Henry Ford Museum, completely revolutionized aircraft manufacturing. Here's how they did it. First, break down manufacturing. Instead of skilled craftsmen building complete aircraft from start to finish, Ford divided B-24 production into over 100,000 individual tasks. 90% of these tasks required minimal training. You didn't need a master craftsman. You needed someone who could learn one specific job really well. Second, assembly line application. They adapted automotive continuous flow production to aircraft. This was unheard of in aircraft manufacturing. Everyone said it was impossible. Ford proved them wrong. Third, standardization obsession. They reduced B-24 Liberator parts from custom-fit components that had to be hand-fitted to interchangeable standardized parts. This is documented in engineering specifications. Every part had to fit every aircraft, no exceptions. Fourth, vertical integration. Control the entire supply chain from raw materials to finished aircraft. No dependencies, no bottlenecks. The statistics from Willow Run production records are absolutely staggering. The plant was designed to produce one B-24 bomber per hour by 1944. One bomber. Every hour. The facility itself, documented in construction records, was the largest room under one roof in the world. 3.5 million square feet with its own internal transportation system. But Willow Run was just the beginning. War Production Board technical bulletins preserved at the National Archives show the systematic transformation across the entire industry. Women workforce integration wasn't just propaganda. Rosie the Riveter was real strategy. Women went from 1% of the aircraft workforce in 1940 to 40% by 1943, according to Labor Department statistics. Training revolution. American planners established aircraft mechanics schools graduating workers in 8 to 12 weeks versus traditional multi-year apprenticeships. Material innovation. They developed new aluminum alloys, synthetic rubber, and manufacturing processes, all documented in patent records. Operations went 24/7. Shift systems kept production lines running continuously. No downtime. Ever. The technological advantages are documented in technical records. Electric spot welding replaced hand riveting. Patent office records show American firms filed over 400 production method patents between 1941 and 1945. Jig and fixture systems allowed unskilled workers to achieve precision that normally required years of training. This is documented in MIT industrial research files. War Production Board Chairman William Knudsen's quote says it all: "We will produce so many aircraft that German industry will drown in them." As American factories implemented these revolutionary techniques, captured German intelligence documents show the Luftwaffe remained completely unaware of the scale of transformation underway. Now let me walk you through the documented acceleration month by month, using War Production Board production reports. This is where the story gets absolutely incredible. 1941. The preparation phase. In January, American factories produced 1771 military aircraft total, all types. Then Roosevelt gives his Arsenal of Democracy speech, committing to 50,000 aircraft annually. Willow Run groundbreaking begins in April 1941. By December, monthly production reaches 2193 aircraft. Modest growth. German intelligence deemed it expected. Nothing alarming. 1942. The ramp-up phase. Production climbs steadily. By December, it reaches 4189 aircraft per month. German intelligence documents captured post-war show Luftwaffe analysts were now paying attention but remained skeptical. A captured intelligence assessment from mid-1942 estimates American production capacity at, quote, perhaps 30,000 aircraft annually maximum. The reality? From War Production Board records? 47,836 aircraft produced in 1942. Already exceeding German estimates. 1943. The breakthrough phase. This is where everything changes. Monthly production reaches 7421 aircraft by December. Willow Run hits its stride, producing one B-24 every 63 minutes by year-end according to plant records. German intelligence reports from the Bundesarchiv show increasing alarm, but they continued underestimating capacity. Albert Speer's planning documents from this period, captured post-war, show German war production assumed American output at roughly 40 to 50,000 annually. The actual U.S. production in 1943? 85,898 aircraft per official records. Here's the intelligence failure that cost Germany the war. Luftwaffe reconnaissance photographs of American factories were completely misinterpreted. German analysts, accustomed to craft production methods, couldn't conceptualize Ford's assembly line scale. One intelligence report from 1943 actually suggests American factories were likely producing training aircraft counted as combat aircraft to inflate statistics. They thought we were lying about the numbers. The strategic positioning was critical. While Germany dispersed aircraft production to avoid bombing, which reduced efficiency, America concentrated and scaled production in massive purpose-built facilities. Willow Run prepared for peak capacity. Boeing Seattle expanded to 5 major facilities. Consolidated San Diego ran B-24 production parallel to Willow Run. Douglas Long Beach mass-produced C-47 transports. North American Aviation scaled up P-51 Mustang production. Then in 1944, as German commanders finally began grasping the scale of American production, official records show the reality exceeded even the most pessimistic German estimates. 1944. This is where American industrial power reaches its absolute peak. Official War Production Board statistics document the most incredible manufacturing achievement in human history. 96,318 military aircraft produced in a single year. Let me break that down for you so you understand the sheer magnitude. 263 aircraft per day. 11 aircraft per hour. One complete warplane every 5.5 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Non-stop. Ford's Willow Run plant records, preserved at the Henry Ford Museum, document the peak achievement. March 1944, they're producing one B-24 Liberator every 63 minutes. Then they achieve peak efficiency. One B-24 every 55 minutes at optimal operation. Monthly output reaches up to 453 B-24s in peak months. The workforce? 42,000 workers, 40% women, working 3 shifts around the clock. Charles Sorensen's documented quote from plant records says it perfectly: "We are now producing B-24 bombers faster than the military can fly them away from our airfield." Think about that. They're building bombers faster than trained pilots can take off with them. But Willow Run was just one plant. War Production Board detailed breakdowns show the staggering total scope. Fighters? 38,873 produced in 1944 alone. P-51 Mustangs, 9,949 units from North American Aviation. P-47 Thunderbolts, 12,601 units from Republic Aviation. P-38 Lightnings, 2,691 units from Lockheed. Bombers? 35,369 produced. B-24 Liberators, 6,792 units combined from Willow Run, Consolidated, and Douglas. B-17 Flying Fortresses, 6,989 units from Boeing, Douglas, and Lockheed Vega. B-29 Super Fortresses, 1,620 units from Boeing. Transport, training, and other aircraft? 22,076 more. Captured German intelligence documents from late 1944, preserved in Imperial War Museum archives, show them finally starting to grasp reality. A Luftwaffe intelligence report from October 1944 revises American production estimates to possibly 70 to 75,000 annually. They're still underestimating by over 20,000 aircraft. Albert Speer's testimony at Nuremberg describes his reaction when accurate figures were finally presented to him in late 1944. Quote, "I initially believed these were Allied psychological warfare numbers. The actual production rates were theoretically impossible given our understanding of aircraft manufacturing requirements." German engineers were completely baffled. Captured technical intelligence reports show them desperately trying to solve what they called the American production paradox. How could quality control be maintained at such speed? How could a largely untrained workforce achieve precision manufacturing? Where did materials come from in such quantities? How were bottlenecks in precision components eliminated? One captured Luftwaffe engineering assessment from December 1944 concluded, "American production methods must represent fundamental manufacturing principles we have failed to understand. Traditional aircraft production calculations do not apply." By mid-1944, U.S. military photography told the story. Long Beach Douglas plant showed B-17s lined up on the airfield awaiting delivery, stretching for miles. Willow Run aerial photos showed B-24s parked in massive lots. Multiple aircraft carriers being loaded simultaneously at ports. As German commanders scrambled to comprehend the production impossibility they were witnessing, captured strategic assessments show the full impact was becoming devastatingly clear. The material imbalance by 1944 was absolutely devastating. Captured German production records and Allied intelligence show the numbers that sealed Germany's fate. German aircraft production in 1944, 40,593 total aircraft, all types, per Reich Air Ministry records. American aircraft production the same year, 96,318 aircraft. America alone produced 2.37 times Germany's total output. Combined Allied production including British and Soviet aircraft? Approximately 160,000 plus aircraft. Germany was drowning. Albert Speer's War Production Ministry documents, captured post-war, reveal the cascading crisis that was destroying the Luftwaffe. First, replacement rate crisis. The Luftwaffe was losing aircraft faster than German industry could replace them. Second, pilot training catastrophe. They couldn't produce enough training aircraft to replace their staggering combat losses. Third, fuel allocation crisis. German military logistics reports show they didn't have enough aircraft fuel even for the planes they did have. U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey interrogations of captured Luftwaffe personnel document the shock and disbelief on the ground. One German fighter pilot, interrogated in March 1945, stated, "We were told American aircraft quality was inferior, but there were simply too many. For every German fighter, we faced 5 or 10 American aircraft." A captured Luftwaffe ground crew member testified, "We could repair and return aircraft to service quickly, but replacement aircraft from Germany took months. Americans seemed to have unlimited replacements immediately." Post-war interrogations of German intelligence officers, preserved in National Archives documents, reveal them finally admitting their systematic failure. Luftwaffe intelligence chief testimony, "We assessed American production by German standards, highly skilled workers, precision manufacturing, traditional methods. We never understood they had abandoned our entire manufacturing philosophy. The strategic advantage became overwhelming." Military historian assessments based on operational records show the devastating impact. By mid-1944, German airspace was dominated by Allied aircraft. Production disparity made this inevitable. Americans could replace losses in days. Germans needed months. The U.S. could dedicate aircraft to multiple theaters simultaneously. Germany faced critical shortages everywhere. German military correspondence from 1944 to 45, captured post-war, shows the psychological impact was equally devastating. Frontline reports describe endless waves of American aircraft. They referenced the American production machine as unstoppable. There's a growing sense throughout these documents that material superiority made German defeat inevitable. Strategic assessment documents show the immediate tactical impact was devastating, but the full strategic consequences would reshape the entire war. U.S. Army Air Force's historical division records show production supremacy enabled operations that were previously impossible. Daylight precision bombing required massive formations with fighter escorts. You could only do this with production surplus. The 8th Air Force peak strength? Over 2,000 heavy bombers operational simultaneously, according to 1944 records. Fighter escort capability using P-51 Mustangs? So many aircraft that bomber losses dropped dramatically after their introduction. Multi-theater operations became reality. Production volume allowed simultaneous major operations everywhere. European theater ran the 8th and 15th Air Forces. Pacific Theater operated the 5th, 7th, 13th, 14th, and 20th Air Forces concurrently. China-Burma-India Theater had separate air operations. Mediterranean Theater fielded additional air forces. All at the same time. Operation Overlord after-action reports from the National Archives document air superiority's critical role on D-Day. Allied air coverage, 11,000 plus aircraft. Luftwaffe aircraft able to respond? Approximately 300. Allied air supremacy was so complete that Eisenhower later stated, and this is documented, quote, "If you see aircraft overhead, they will be ours." U.S. Navy and Marine Corps aviation records show the production impact in the Pacific. By 1944, the U.S. Navy operated more aircraft carriers than the rest of the world combined. The island-hopping campaign achieved air superiority at every single landing site, enabled by overwhelming aircraft numbers. The B-29 strategic bombing campaign against Japan was only possible because of production capacity to build and replace those expensive superfortresses. Churchill's correspondence, preserved in Imperial War Museum archives, shows British relief and recognition. Churchill to Roosevelt in 1944 credited American production with making victory certain. British military assessments acknowledged U.S. production ended their fears of losing the air war. War Production Board final reports show the industrial transformation. Aircraft industry employment peaked at over 2 million workers in 1944. The economic value? Aircraft production represented the largest manufacturing program in human history to that point. Post-war assessments showed the U.S. could have sustained even higher production if needed. Captured German military planning documents show desperate adaptations forced by American production superiority. Dispersal of aircraft production facilities which reduced efficiency. Underground factory construction, a massive resource diversion. Fighter production prioritization at the expense of bombers. Jet aircraft development acceleration, a desperation innovation. American media coverage from 1944 shows the public impact. Life magazine ran photo essays showing massive aircraft production facilities. Newsreel footage featured aircraft rolling off assembly lines. Public morale soared from visible production superiority. But official military historians and academic institutions document this production miracle represented far more than tactical advantage. Leading military historians' published assessments established this production miracle's true significance. Richard Overy, in his 1995 book, Why the Allies Won, argues American production capacity was the single most decisive factor in Allied victory. More important than any individual battle. John Keegan, the Yale University military historian, documented that U.S. aircraft production fundamentally changed the character of modern warfare. U.S. Army War College historical assessments classify American World War II aircraft production as a revolutionary transformation of warfare through industrial capacity. The strategic bombing debate was resolved by production. Academic military history documented in Air Force Historical Research Agency studies shows this clearly. Pre-war theorists like Duhet and Mitchell predicted air power would be decisive, but they lacked proof. American production provided the material capacity to test strategic bombing theory at actual scale. The post-war U.S. Air Force creation in 1947 directly resulted from demonstrated air power importance, which was only enabled by production capacity. MIT and Stanford Industrial Engineering research documents the lasting innovations. Assembly line adaptation. The post-war commercial aircraft industry adopted Ford's techniques. Boeing documents show continuous flow production methods adopted in the 1950s. Workforce training. Accelerated training methods pioneered in World War II aircraft industry became standard in American manufacturing. Quality control. Statistical process control methods developed for aircraft production became the foundation of modern manufacturing quality assurance. National Security Council documents, now declassified, show World War II production created the Cold War strategic foundation. U.S. Air Force strategic doctrine was built on the assumption of production superiority. NATO strategy assumed American industrial capacity could outproduce the Soviet Union. The Korean War aircraft production ramp-up from 1950 to 53 used World War II methods and actually reopened facilities. U.S. military strategic planning documents from the National Defense University show lasting impact. The arsenal of democracy concept became permanent U.S. strategic doctrine. The Defense Production Act of 1950 institutionalized government-industry coordination learned in World War II. American military strategy thereafter assumed industrial mobilization capacity as a strategic weapon. Even post-war German military historical assessments acknowledge this. Bundeswehr military history. Research office publications document it clearly. Albert Speer's memoir, Inside the Third Reich, extensively analyzes German failure to match Allied production. German military education materials use American World War II production as a case study in industrial mobilization. Military history curricula at West Point, Naval War College, and Air Force Academy include World War II aircraft production as a case study in industrial mobilization, an example of strategic-level warfare beyond battlefield tactics, and a demonstration that material production can be decisive in modern warfare. The Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum educational materials emphasize World War II aircraft production as the greatest industrial achievement of the 20th century. Willow Run is specifically highlighted as a revolutionary manufacturing achievement. Rosie the Riveter represents the legacy of women in the industrial workforce. Professional military education materials emphasize the fundamental lessons. Material capacity matters. Industrial base is a strategic weapon. Innovation in production can be as decisive as weapons technology. This incredible documented achievement perfectly demonstrates a fundamental truth military historians and strategists continue to study today. Military historians and strategic studies programs documented in professional military education curricula identify the fundamental lesson here. American ingenuity, industrial capacity, and willingness to abandon traditional thinking created a strategic weapon German engineers never comprehended until too late. Let's reinforce this with the final verified statistics. The numbers remain absolutely staggering in the historical record. 300,317 total military aircraft produced from 1940 to 1945. That's the War Production Board official final count. Peak production? 1 aircraft every 5.5 minutes in 1944. German intelligence underestimated American capacity by over 200,000 aircraft. Willow Run alone produced 86 85 B-24 bombers. That's more than the entire Italian aircraft industry produced during the entire war. Henry Ford's verified quote from the Ford archive says it perfectly. They said it was impossible to mass-produce aircraft. We proved the impossible was just something nobody had tried yet. Military history educational materials connect World War II aircraft production to the broader American innovation tradition. Eli Whitney's interchangeable parts in 1798. Ford's Model T mass production in 1913. World War II aircraft production in the 1940s. Cold War aerospace dominance continuing that legacy. Here's the strategic truth from historian consensus. Material superiority doesn't guarantee victory, but material inferiority almost guarantees defeat. German engineering excellence couldn't overcome American industrial scale. If you're amazed by how American industry produced 300,000 aircraft, 1 every 5.5 minutes at peak, you need to hear about the secret project that built the entire Pentagon in just 16 months while simultaneously constructing the world's largest building. German military intelligence couldn't figure that out either. Hit subscribe to discover more documented stories of American industrial achievements that defied the impossible. Every video on this channel is backed by military archives, official records, and academic research. We don't just tell history. We prove it with documentation. Join the community learning real history based on verified facts. The documented historical record proves one enduring truth. Never underestimate American industrial innovation and the power of thinking differently. German engineers learned that lesson 300,000 aircraft too late. 300,000 aircraft. 5.5 minutes per plane. One nation's industrial revolution that changed warfare forever. That's not propaganda. That's documented history.